Hi everyone, Professor Philip Travis here, EOU History 112, World History Part 2. This week we are looking at the Second World War, and we're going to examine this subject very broadly as it relates to events like the rise of fascism, particularly in Nazi Germany, as it relates to the Holocaust, as it relates to events like the usage of the atomic bomb and so forth. So we're going to be looking at some big events here, some big significant elements associated with the Second World War. And for those of you who are interested in more deeper looks at the Second World War, we examine the Second World War from the Soviet perspective in my History 448 course. And I also will be in this spring, the 448 course I'm offering this winter term, and this spring term I am offering military history, where we'll also be examining the Second World War in some detail. But this week, 1 week on the Second World War, and so we will be examining it with respects to more broad themes, particularly the significance of fascism, how fascism developed, particularly in Nazi Germany, the development of the Holocaust being an example of the most extreme destructive influence of the ideology of racism that, of course, was connected to the age of imperialism that we've already been examining in this class, and also, of course, events like the usage of the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and, of course, first tested in New Mexico in the United States before they were used in Hiroshima and Nagasaki on August 6th and August 9th, 1945. And of course, connected to both of those, or all of these themes, are questions about democracy. How did fascism emerge within a democratic society? In the case of like Nazi Germany, for example, the issue of race, genocide, and war crimes, racism, genocide, and war crimes, and how we understand that since the Second World War. And of course also the development of issues like nuclear proliferation, the nuclear arms races, and so forth, which are unleashed following the development of and the use of the atomic bombs to end the Second World War by the United States. So these are some of the big themes that we're sort of going to be thinking about this week. You're reading Patterns of World History, Chapter 28 and 29. I also have a film up for you, and this film is Atomic Cafe. It is a very, very thought-provoking documentary, and I would like everyone to watch this film. I might put a little quiz response in there for you with this film, because I think it's very important that we watch this. I think it's important with respect to thinking about the significance of not only the development and the use of the atomic bombs, but also how that then shaped American society in the developing Cold War in the 40s and 50s and beyond afterwards, which is what the film looks at. It looks at the development, the testing, the use of these bombs, and then how it shapes, particularly American society, during the early Cold War. So the film is Atomic Cafe. I'd like everybody to watch it this week. I might put a quiz in there, just a brief sort of response quiz for you, to just make sure you're watching it and you're thinking about some of these big themes, and of course engage those themes in the discussion forum, as this is part of our assigned discussion for this week. So this week we'll probably have a little quiz with Atomic Cafe, and we'll have the discussion board. So it's a pretty light week. The discussion forum, as usual, 2 days of activity, 1 post, 2 replies. Replies to your professor do count, by the way. I just want to see us all having a conversation about these things. We've had really good discussion forum this term, I think. The other item that I want everyone to be thinking about is, if you did not do the first paper, make sure you're preparing to do the second paper. The second paper is due at the end of the term, so you still have time on this. And I'm going to make the prompt visible next week, so you have a couple of weeks to work on it. But if anybody wants me to put the prompt for the paper up this week, please just email me, and I will put the the paper prompt for the second paper option up this week. So remember, I dropped the lowest score. So if you did terribly on the first paper, you can do the second paper, and it will be of no, you can't possibly do worse. If you haven't done a paper, then right now you'll have a 0 for the paper. So you need to do this paper so that grade cancels out the 0. So you only have to write one paper in the course, and I dropped the lowest paper grade. So if you want to do the second paper to pull up your paper score, you can do that without any risk. If you haven't done the paper, you need to do the second paper option that's mandatory, which is due at the end of the term. So it's something to be thinking about right now. Okay, let's get right to the factoid. Factoid for this week is this. Go with a little Oregon history here. Oregon is actually the site of the second post-Pearl Harbor bombing on the United States. And this occurred on September 9th, 1942. And it occurred on the site of Mount Emily, not the Mount Emily in La Grande. In La Grande, of course, we see the famous or the iconic Mount Emily, the picturesque Mount Emily in La Grande. This site is not Mount Emily in La Grande. It is Mount Emily in southern Oregon towards the border of California. And particularly, this site was at a location called Wheeler's Ridge. And this was a case where on September 9th, 1942, a Japanese submarine I-25, launched a small Japanese plane that flew over the forest of southern Oregon and northern California and dropped incendiary devices in an attempt to set the forest on fire and thereby, cause, a problematic environmental situation in the United States that would potentially, if it got out of control, tie down some of the resources of the United States. Yes, it's not a hugely significant event, but the attack in southern Oregon, September 9th, 1942, on Wheeler's Ridge in Mount Emily, was the second case of a bombing of the United States. And this occurred on September 9th, 1942, when a small Japanese plane sought to set forest fires by dropping incendiary devices designed to burn, to set the forest ablaze, to set the forest on fire at a period when, of course, the forests are usually pretty dry, and to thereby cause domestic environmental crisis in the United States that might tie down the resources of the United States. The first bombing, by the way, post-Pearl Harbor was actually in the Aleutian Island chain of Alaska. But the second bombing that ever occurred on U.S. mainland actually occurred in Oregon at Mount Emily or Wheeler's Ridge on September 9th, 1942. That's the factoid. Just send me the gist of that no later than Wednesday by midnight to get your bonus point added towards the test score by the end of the term. So send me that email no later than Wednesday by midnight. Let's have a great week, and let me know if you have any questions, and I'll see you in the discussion forum.